It's happening again. Joel Embiid goes down again just when the Philadelphia 76ers had some time off. We are back right where we started.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On 76ers. I'm Kayla, Santiago alongside Pompey with you each and every day. Well, there's no good news here in Philadelphia right now because Joel Embiid goes down in the first half of the game. They fall to the Indiana Pacers as well, dropping this game after a big week of rest. I mean, this team and Joel Embiid cannot catch a break. It didn't look great in this situation. Keith, why don't you tell us more, kind of wrap around everything? I know you alluded to that he's going to be reevaluated or looked at throughout this weekend. What are you hearing right now? Because you see the news, it's happening again, and Joel Embiid goes down just about coming back and trying to get big for this stretch.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right now, like what I am hearing, like you said, is he's going to get reevaluated. But right now he has a sinus fracture. So what
Mhm.
that's basically, your sinuses, your nose, and all that. That injury typically takes around 3 to 6 weeks, right? It could be for your nose. The thing is now that the big thing is if it's the playoffs, if we notice, Joel Embiid would always have a mask on and this and that. So now I guess it's a matter of like, is he going to wear a mask? Is he going to just not play? Is he going to let it heal? The whole nine. But I mean, the big story to me is that this guy cannot stay healthy. I
Mhm.
mean, you talk about every year, when he was drafted, he missed the first 2 seasons. And then after that point, it's been like meniscus tears, it's been all other things. And now all of a sudden, it's like, here we go again. Now it's like, he gets hit in the face and there's another fracture. This is the third facial fracture that Joel Embiid has had in his career. So, to me, it's just, here we go again. This guy is always getting hurt. And it's weird because, I don't know if because maybe people didn't know the severity of his injury, but it just seemed like the fans were kind of sort of like, oh, you got hurt for that. It's like now people are starting to question his heart, his commitment, and a lot of other things. So, it's just weird right about now.
It feels like he's made a blast at this point, and you alluded to all the injuries. I mean, looking through everything, it feels like it was a lifetime ago, but also so soon at the same time. So you alluded to the fractured foot, then you go to a meniscus tear, then you have that orbital fracture, the first one happening in 2017, 2018, then the knee tendonitis in 18-19 as well. Dislocated finger, partially torn meniscus, and other orbital fracture, sprain LCL, then another torn meniscus or a full torn meniscus 23-24, and then you go into that sinus fracture. Oh, by the way, he also broke his thumb too, in addition to having a ton of other things happen to him. So when you look at it right now, I mean, we continue to say this team cannot win without Joel Embiid. It's going to be tough for them. And well, the second half pretty much showed this team, for one, cannot stop Tyrese Haliburton for the life of them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that PG only had 15 points. Tyrese had 22. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But this team, as they're constructed, because they're constructed right now to play around their star player in Joel Embiid. But who is that star player if he can't stay on the court? Consistently, people have made excuses for him saying, oh, well, he's the best center in the league. He just doesn't get a chance. He constantly gets hurt. At this point, I'm not saying you have to blame Joel Embiid because it seems like it's freak accidents happening all the time, but come on now, he can't be out on the floor. This team is continuing to be constructed around him, and I don't want to overblow this injury. And maybe he will wear that mask and he'll play through it and he'll be back. But every time it seems like you're holding your breath to wait and see if something will happen. Otherwise, the sky is literally falling in Philadelphia, and that's really kind of what it was last night when you saw him go down.
Yeah, the only problem is like you don't have anybody else that
Mm-mm.
on this roster that's going to lead them far in the
No.
playoffs. I mean, like we talked about it. Like you looked at Tyrese Haliburton. I mean, this guy was raining threes left and right. He had 32 points, 11 assists. He was 7 for 5 on on 3 pointers. I mean 7 for 15. You look at Tyrese Maxey, he had a pretty good game, I guess. He had 22 points on 7 for 15, but he was a minus 21 in 36 minutes. He had 6 turnovers and only 2 assists. Paul George, ever since that time, Paul George was like the guy. Joel Embiid comes back and now he's on witness protection program. He had, 15 points on 5 for 12 shooting. He was a negative 29. So as much as it's like, yo, you shouldn't build your team around it. It just seems like in a game that we felt like they were going to win against a banged up Indiana Pacers team, they got boat raced. I mean, they
Hmm.
just looked bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, they did come back and they fought hard and they did this, but at the same time, it was just these two guys. I mean, Paul George is going to have to step up majorly, but outside of that, I don't know if they have anybody on the team that's going to be able to be that much of a difference maker like Embiid was.
No, they're not. And I mean, you look at the stats too before Joel Embiid went down: 12 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, in 17 and a half minutes before he went down and then was ruled out for the rest of the game. So then you think you get the group together and you say, okay, well, let's go and try and win this thing. And the 76ers were just so out of place. They couldn't adjust. You mentioned gave a hard fight, but at the same time, they still fall to the Indiana Pacers, a team, as you alluded to. We said, okay, well, Tyrese Haliburton hasn't been having the same numbers he did a year ago. All of a sudden, against Philadelphia, he has an absolute free for all, rain of threes, doing his thing. And Philadelphia ends up paying for it in the end. The defense on him, the defense in general, just wasn't there. As soon as Joel Embiid goes down, really, even before that, the 76ers weren't super convincing. But at the same time, as soon as he goes down, it's like, okay, then the whole thing happens with Jared McCain. He goes down for a little bit. He gets evaluated for concussion. He ends up being okay. It was a dramatic night last night for the Philadelphia 76ers. In addition to that, looks like a bad loss definitely on paper too, because this is a team that only had 10 wins before this. The 76ers had 7, that you were trying to kind of climb the ranks a little bit in the Eastern Conference too before this game that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you look at it. I mean, it was a bad loss. I mean, I think people got exposed. I think,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, Jarrett got exposed a little bit. Now, again, he did hurt his head and he did bounce back, but he had another subpar game. I mean, he had more fouls than made shots, right? I mean, and then just as many points. And then Yabusele, he looked he got exposed for basically the second game in a row. And he's a good player, but it just seems like he has a tough time guarding smaller athletic players like Pascal Siakam and all the other wings that they have, Obi Top and all those guys. He just couldn't handle with them. So, you know, this was a bad loss. I mean, I felt like Ricky Council, I know he shot 4 for 12, but I felt like he played okay. At least he was a plus. Like when you look at it, there was only two guys who basically wasn't getting torched, and that was KJ Martin and Ricky Council the fourth. But outside of that, it was just a bad matchup for him. I mean, we talk about it. You know, you look at it, we said Pascal Siakam was going to be a guy that they would have to contend with. In the second half, he was just torching them, especially in the fourth quarter. Obi Toppin. I mean, I forgot how many dunks he had. I lost count. I mean, seriously. I mean, I
You're
literally
right.
lost. I mean, it was just crazy. And then, TJ McConnell, every time he comes here, you're always saying to yourself, like, man, did they really just let him walk? Did they really let him walk? So it was a bad matchup for the 76ers. And to me, I do know that they did beat Indiana Pacers, and I'll give them credit for that. But outside of that, they played a bunch of bad teams. So now I'm looking at it like maybe we were hyping them up a little bit too much because this is a game that they were supposed to show up and they didn't until it was too late.
And it further goes to prove too that this team is only going to get anywhere if Joel Embiid is on the floor. Because if he's not on the floor, it seems like they can't be consistent. They crumble a little bit. And we're gonna wait and see because they're gonna take the weekend to check in on Joel Embiid and to give an official update after that as well to see where he will be. But you're either expecting him to miss some extended time or you're expecting him to play with a mask on his face. And we all remember when the mask was on his face before, he got frustrated with it. He was throwing it off of him. He was trying to hit the free throws because it was bothering him. I mean, Joel's not going to be 100% maybe at all this season. It was already with the knee swelling, and now this on top of it. So you look at it right now, and just when there was a glimpse of hope with this team, just when we said this is an important stretch in December, they should beat Indiana. They have a chance to really win some games and dig themselves out of this hole. Then Joel Embiid gets injured again. And the team, I mean, without him, they just don't look like they want to be out there on the basketball court. So they try to come back, they try to do their thing, and they just can't at this point. Granted, if they know they don't have Joel Embiid, they're going to practice like they don't have Joel Embiid. But at the same time, I mean, this has been the story all season long, Keith. It's just one after the other after the other. And it's not looking good for the Philadelphia 76ers right now. Also, Kayla Martin and Kyle Lowry, too. I mean, that you have to put that into the factor as well of those guys being out and this all
Nah, they
happening.
wouldn't have made a difference
No,
last night.
they
I'm
wouldn't. It
sorry.
wouldn't have
Yeah,
made a
yeah.
difference, but it just piles
No.
on. It piles
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
injury
Oh,
map. It's
okay.
like, oh,
Yeah,
I have a list
yeah,
as long as
yeah.
Santa Claus's naughty or nice list coming out here for Sixers injuries. What are we doing here? No,
Yeah,
it wouldn't have made a difference. But yeah,
it's
it has to be frustrating, I think, for this team, this organization, Joel Embiid too. So I mean, the biggest takeaway here is that once again, it's not good for the Philadelphia 76ers because even if he does play with a mask and comes back sooner, it's going to be tough for him to be able to compete at 100%.
well, my concern is like he's already frustrated,
Right.
so does he really want to play with a mask? It's like right about now
No.
when, I mean, that's the thing, with I mean, I know people are questioning his manhood and all. I shouldn't say manhood, but they're just questioning him right now. Um, so his toughness, that's what they're questioning, his toughness. But he does have a fracture, but Twitter was going crazy with him. But at the same time, it's kind of like he may get guilted into it because if you don't, then people are like, well, what's the deal? But at the end of the day, they're 7-16. You know what I mean? It's not like they're 16-7. They are
Yeah.
7-16, and we'll see. I mean, they have to. They better win these next two games against Charlotte. That's all I'm saying. They better win these next two games. But the bad part about this game was that when you look at it, so the Indiana Pacers only really have one center in Miles Turner. They made a trade earlier yesterday to get a guy, Thomas Bryant, and you would think the Sixers would have taken advantage of that. I mean, I know Joel went hurt. I mean, got injured, but at the same time, this is a team that just don't have any post plays, and I was expecting them to just, you know, feed Embiid and let him try to get this guy in foul trouble, Miles Turner, and it just didn't happen. He ended up with 5 fouls, but at the same time, Embiid was out the game at the halfway point. But so I just felt like they could have taken advantage of that, and they just didn't.
They didn't. They did not. And this was a much needed stretch that I said throughout this week that the 76ers really need to win some games. And now it's really needed, but I don't think it's going to happen, especially with whatever happens to Joel Embiid, because he's not just going to go out there and be completely fine. It's either going to be extended time or that mask coming out. But once again, they will have updates after the weekend. So we will be on top of that as well and making sure we let you guys all know and our reaction to what will be next for this team. 121, 107, your final. The 76ers fall to the Indiana Pacers. They will be back in action against Charlotte. Need to win games. We're in December. Who cares? They need to win games at this point of the season because if they can't win against Charlotte with or without Joel Embiid, well, you can say sayonara to this season, people, because it has been a tough road ahead. But we're going to wait and see. Once again, updates will come after the weekend, so we will be on top of that. Well, a quick post game recap here because what there is to say is Joel Embiid gets hurt once again, and we'll see where that leads the Philadelphia 76ers. So, Keith, anything else you want to wrap up with here on this somber night here in Philadelphia, summer morning, we should say as well? As fans want to look at something positive, but we just got to be realistic on Locked On 76ers.
I mean, the positive thing is that Joel Embiid will be able to play with a mask. Like, that's the most positive thing you'll get. And then maybe Paul George will get more touches in the game early on, and then that will get him situated. So, but outside of that, there's not a lot of positives. There's not. I mean, KJ Martin played well, but outside of that, it wasn't a lot of that. Guys, well, I take that back. Kelly Oubre was good too, but he was a -12. But outside of that, wasn't a lot of positives. No.
No, there was not. So it's a wait and see game once again. That has been the game we have played all season long. Are people tired of it yet? Let us know in the comments what you think, how you're reacting to the Joel Embiid news, and what you want to see going forward. And if you still have belief in the Philadelphia 76ers, or if you're looking at it and saying, this is just not the time for this to happen once again. Let us know in the comments. And thank you all so much for joining us right here on Locked On 76ers. We will keep with you all and stay updated on the Joel Embiid news throughout the weekend. For Keith Pompey, I'm Kayla Santiago. And thank you guys all so much for tuning in to Locked On 76ers.